is highlighting pretty much everything that queer men in book spaces.
I think it's a little uncomfy to acknowledge out loud, but I think it's important because I've seen a lot of people try to articulate what feels weird about this, what feels weird about the response to Heated Rivalry, like what's kind of rubbing the wrong way. And I think what it comes down to, and this is the uncomfy part, Heated Rivalry, the story, was written for women.
We know. This isn't new information, nor is it uncomfortable to talk about. romance and boy love stories written by women and for women have existed for at least 60 years. The very first confirmed slash fic is a 40-page Kirk Spock story called The Ring of Sojourn that was written by a woman named Jennifer Guttridge in the 60s. Saying that Heated Rivalry is a story by a woman for women is not the answer, it is the problem, and I really need y'all to sit with that. The behavior of straight women in this fandom is having real-life negative consequences for actual queer men. So let's talk about who Heated Rivalry is for. For those who don't know me, my name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history.
This story was written with the intention that women were the primary consuming audience.
The book was, but the book and the series are two different things written by two different people for two different mediums. I worked in television for 20 plus years before I became a historian, so I can tell you two things. The first is that men have a slight demographic advantage in movie viewership, but women drive television. On some level, all television shows are written under the assumption that women will be the primary audience, especially ones for streaming networks. And the second thing is that while you certainly have an idea of who your audience is while you're producing a series, especially one that's based on a popular IP, you are always hoping that your stories resonate broadly. That's how you get a hit series. All different kinds of people have to be able to connect to the story. Obviously, Jacob Tierney and Crave know who the fans of the books are, but Jacob Tierney is a gay man, and many of the changes and additions that he made to the story while he was writing the scripts and directing the series are very specifically queer elements. Straight women didn't need to see Yuna ask her son for forgiveness, but queer people who have difficult or non-existent relationships with their families, we needed to see it. That was for us.
And I think historically, a lot of gay content, gay media, has been produced by the gay community for the gay community, being the primary target audience to consume that media.
This isn't the first time that queer stories or queer characters have dominated the zeitgeist like this. Not even close. But it is one of the first times, if not the first time, that we've seen this level of popularity for a queer romance with a happy ending. Because usually when our stories hit the mainstream, they're very often written or directed by and for straight people, and they are almost always stereotypes or tragedies. I did a whole video a couple of weeks ago about the Hays Code and what makes Heated Rivalry's ending feel so revolutionary. But even if it were true that this is the first queer story ever to get this kind of attention and it was produced specifically for a female audience, Heated Rivalry is a story about queer men, and it is absolutely absurd to suggest that there needs to be any kind of discussion about whether or not queer men are welcome in the fandom for a story about two men falling in love.
You know, it's a story about the gay community, but it wasn't intended as the gay community being the primary audience for it.
And this right here is the root of the problem. The belief that you can tell stories that are about a certain type of person while also saying that those stories are not for that type of person. In the early days of slash fic, by which I mean the 60s and 70s, women writing stories about their favorite male characters falling in love and having sex was subversive and a little revolutionary. Not only because it meant women were exploring their own sexuality and writing erotica for themselves and their friends, but also because two men having sex was a crime punishable by jail time in most of the country at the time when slash fic was born. Jennifer Guttridge wrote The Ring of Sojourn 1 year before Stonewall. But with the explosion of fan fiction and mainstream romance, especially in the last decade or so, queer male characters have been dehumanized. They become commodities to be offered to and consumed by straight women. Many of the straight women who write stories don't know what they don't know about the lived experience of queer men. And many women who read those same stories don't have queer men in their lives. So everything that they know about being a gay or bisexual man, they have learned from another woman's fantasy. And that's not great. There are certainly straight women who write beautiful and complex stories about queer men. Annie Proulx wrote Brokeback Mountain, the short story on which the movie was based, but they're the exception.
And so you've kind of got this scenario where it's like, are you in our space? Are we in your space?
Neither. Fandom is a shared space. If straight women only want to talk to other straight women about Heated Rivalry, I certainly have some thoughts about that, but they are welcome to do so in a group chat or in a friend's living room. But if you're out here on the internet or at a public watch party or at a convention, you don't get to decide who else is in that fan space. And you definitely don't get to behave as though you're the one who's being victimized or marginalized when queer men express an opinion about a love story between two men.
When it comes to this right now, I think it's just new and it's different, and a lot of us are digesting it.
I'm going to say this as gently as I can, but just because something is new to you doesn't mean that it's a new thing. If you haven't heard these conversations before, it's because you're not in spaces that would give you the opportunity to listen when queer people speak. Every time another gay is buried in a super popular series, every time another strong, independent woman has a sassy twink for a best friend, every time a lesbian is put on screen with the express purpose of titillating men, we speak up. Queer people, Black people, disabled people, all marginalized people have been screaming about the impact of telling stories about us, without us, for decades. I desperately need straight women in the Heated Rivalry fandom to understand that you are the ones who are new to this conversation, not us. And if you are unwilling to listen, especially to someone like Don, a gay man who is both a New York Times bestselling author and a longtime participant in fan culture, then I need you to think long and hard about the ways in which you are willing to objectify and dehumanize queer men for your own entertainment. I'm not saying that straight women shouldn't write or read romance, obviously. But what I am saying is that queer men are not just characters in romance novels. They are living, breathing people struggling every day under the weight of systemic homophobia. All of this discourse isn't just a fun thought experiment for queer people. It is a vital conversation, the stakes of which are astronomically high, especially for those of us who live in the United States right now. If you're not willing to welcome queer people into the fandom for a queer love story and to listen when we talk about that story in the context of our own experiences, or if you're cheering for two men to get married in your favorite novel but can't be bothered to care that marriage equality is currently under threat in the US, then you really should stick to MF romance because you don't deserve our stories. That's it for today.